I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like. All right, what's up, world? Welcome back to I Mix What I Like. Jared Ball, Sudip Bhattacharya. We're for our continuing Donut King series discussions of Black and Asian economic narratives and versus the reality. So welcome everybody. Please do like, share, subscribe, put this in your socials, invite others to join you. Sudip, how you doing this morning? How you feeling?
I'm okay. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, perfectly.
Perfect. Awesome. Yeah, no, I'm excited to, because I think you sent me a couple of things too. You sent me the really the brainwashing into like richness that I watched eventually, and that was kind of entertaining too. And kind of really directly related to the Donut King, but also related to the Rich Dad Poor Dad conversation we had. So yeah.
Yeah. So please, folks, I'll make sure all the links are available. But this is again an ongoing conversation we're having. We've just again made our meetings public as we work on this project, and we've been having a lot of fun with it and sharing our notes and discussions publicly. And so today we were going to review one or another article that you had found, and I just titled the piece Crazy Rich Asians or Crazy Rich Asian Economics, because I do remember the film. And then I thought, well, since I made the thumbnail and the title, why don't we just revisit that film real quick, which we both have.
Yeah.
And I thought we could at least start there, dispatch of that pretty quickly, and then get to the more serious.
Yeah.
If you don't mind, unless there was another way you wanted to do it, but
no, that's perfect.
So because in many ways, it started as a joke, but this is it fits perfectly with our project because yes, it is an absolutely horrible film. But this is part of the point. It does several things that we're, I think, looking to highlight as a problem here. So do you want to go first? Do you want to get us started with your thoughts on the film? Or
no, actually, I want to hear. I mean, all I can say is I did rewatch it, so I'm glad we're going to talk about it. So I was like, you know what? I kind of don't want to, but at the same time, it's been a while. And I rewatched it. I wrote some notes about it, and there were some things that really jumped out to me. And like you said, directly connected to what we'll eventually get into, which is this theme of racial triangulation.
Oh yeah, man.
And there is internal triangulation that's happening here. So it direct, but I want to hear your ideas first, and we can just bounce off each other.
I mean, I don't have many. I have just a few notes here. My first note is I wrote crazy rich Christians. So, cause they're very clear. They wanted to make sure we understood that these are good Christian Asians, right? I thought that was odd. And then I keep saying I wanted to look into this. And I think I did a quick Google search, but I don't remember. Cause I was like, what percentage of Chinese Singaporeans are Christian? And honestly, I don't know, but it seemed an odd and very overt and aggressive.
It's not that high.
But they were very clear. Like, we got a prayer group, we got like a Bible study, like it was like a whole. So I was like, okay, so that was that jumped out. But then I saw, from that opening scene with the coming out of the storm and the rain, and the whites don't know that they're rich, and then she buys the hotel and all of this. I just said, so my next note was equivalence based on colonial norms. So it's again, it's not, it's a slight coloring of the colonial apparatus by saying now, and then she can turn around and tell the white man to clean up the mess that her son has created on the floor of the hotel that she just now bought in front of him when he was not wanting her to stay there. And we're meant to then be, as an audience, we're encouraged to see this as this is the uprising. This is the get back. This is and now that she can, and then that last look that she gives, and even really the little boy gives when she says, come, let's go to our suite or whatever, and he gives that look back at the white man, and it's like, now, and again, of course, and by the way, I forgot the part, she buys it from the very friendly white owner who adores her.
He also had a very stupid name. Lord. So just for anyone, because I think the first scene is so evocative. Oh, I think there's some echo weirdly.
I don't hear it.
Okay.
So others hear it? Right.
The first scene was so interesting because when I first watched it the first time, when it first came out, obviously I wasn't like a liberal then, but there is a bit of like joy in saying, oh, I know what's happening, and they're gonna, come back with, because it's Eleanor Young, the matriarch of the family in 1995 London, who goes into this hotel, and immediately the white people there, who are racist and scumbags, but they never seen a East Asian person, which was also strange. This is not 1955 London, 1960
right.
This is 1995.
95, and would that have really been how they? Would it have been that aggressive?
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. So I was like, okay. And then the interesting thing.
And by the way, his name, you're right. His name is Lord Rupert Calthorpe Cavendish Gore.
Yeah, I guess it's like a funny, like little kish, like, oh, that's so funny. But at the end of the day, the whole point is the boy does make a mess. He rubs his shoes like on the freaking thing that on the floor that the workers have to clean. Just clean.
Well, would have to, and then
exactly. And but then what's interesting too, which is about the triangulation, which we will get into, so people, if they came in and didn't understand what that was, we'll explain what that is later. But what's interesting is the front desk people say, wouldn't you be more comfortable in Chinatown? But these Asians are special. They don't want to be with the Chinatown Asians. So I thought that was
they don't have to be.
They don't have to be, right. Right. So, and then Lord Calthorpe the Third, Gore, Bush, Reagan
Lord
comes
Rupert
down.
Calthorpe Cavendish Gore.
Beef Wellington the Third.
Trump.
Yeah.
Clinton.
He comes down. Exactly. Everything that's going on. Might as well.
Oh my God. Epstein.
So he comes down. And he because the thing is, she goes out like, you wait a second, because they're not letting them stay. Yeah. And then she goes on the phone, and she comes back, and eventually her husband, who we never really meet throughout the whole film, he's alive.
That is a good point.
Yeah, it was very strange, because these are things I've noticed the second time around. The first time I just watched it with my partner, we thought it was okay, but we were also taken aback as aesthetically why the movie is not good. So there's like two different levels to the movie. It's really not a good movie. And then She returns, says my husband. She returns, and then finally Lord Cavendish the third for Bush comes down and is like, and he looks like a caricature. He looks like the Kentucky Fried Chicken guy.
Yep.
And he comes out and he's like, "Oh, Eleanor," and then, but that's the important scene, because then they, like, to your point, they trade off. She said now she's gonna be the new owners. Like, that's the come up, like you said. That's the uprising.
That's the uprising.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, as I interpret it, it's in the context of our project, that is the uprising we're encouraged to only ever go for.
Yeah.
No political struggle, no redistribution, no revolution. Just go get the bag, and then you can maybe one day walk in and buy a hotel in front of the people that mistreat you.
Yeah.
And I so I was like, this is and then I made a note, like, and then I only have three other quick notes.
Okay.
One is Ken Young and Aquafina, are they, I asked a question, is this racism? Is what they're doing anti-Black and anti-Asian racism in their caricatures and their performances? And when Ken Young walks in and he's doing that, he actually introduces his character by doing a fake accent. A thick fake Chinese accent that he then has to then tell everybody is fake. Like and then he says, "Oh, I don't really have an accent." He starts talking like he normally does. And then of course Aquafina, who I know has been called out in the past, does her whole Black affectation and AAVE attempt and all this other kind of stuff. So I was just like, I don't know. And then I noted that it's old money. And then they make the point of, at some point, I forgot who's talking, but I wrote that they talk of Singapore, and I think it's the rich mother who apparently her family got there when Singapore was nothing.
Was just farmers, pig farmers. I
wrote a note. I was like, is this another? I mean, I know I'm caught up in the moment, but I was like, is this an Asian version of the land with no people for a people with no land? Like, it was.
I wrote that down. So that stuck up to me too. Yeah.
Like, it had that kind of, it was
Aquafina explaining it.
Okay. So it's like, but it like, I took it like, so we're meant to see, so if we see these rich people enjoying their opulence and even at times being mean and abusive to one another and other people, it's supposed to be, well, they earned it because they built this place out of nothing. And I took it, to me, I just was like, this is like the Asian Zionism or something. I was like, what is going on? But anyway, and then the last note I made was that, because the rest of the movie is more or less, a romantic comedy paint by numbers. You can almost tell, like, there's going to be the conflict and then the healing. And then we even get at the end the other cousin or whatever who breaks up with her husband. We get like this rich girl feminism, which she stands up.
She
stands up to her husband. But the only other note I have is that they play, because they do a lot of remakes of American pop songs. And they remade Madonna's Material Girl.
That's what that was.
During her makeover, during the lead's pre-wedding makeover.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm thinking, so this is again the whole thing of the poor girl gets her makeover, and it's the what is it, what was it, that old movie, the Rain on the Plain, mainly in Spain, where she has to be taught how to speak English properly, and then we're getting it's an old, somebody in the chat will know. It's it's a famous old white movie where the poor has to be taught up and brought up in culture. So like this character is an intelligent economics professor, so she doesn't need quite that level of intellectual uplift, but she has to get her makeover, her poor girl makeover. So she can be properly reintroduced, and then she makes that entrance in her dress, and the mother even notices her, and we get that stereotypical thing where the mean girls are mean to her, except for the one chubby friend at the end who gives her a nice little bit of encouragement. I was like, this is all just.
But also in that scene, what's interesting?
My Fair Lady, thank you. That's what I was talking about.
Okay,
that's what I was talking about. Exactly. Yeah.
Let's see. I wrote that scene because I wrote a bunch of notes just watching it like on a notebook because it's just easier. Because there was just a lot. Because usually I pause and I go back to a Google Doc, and that's why I have my phone out here too. But this one I just said, you know what? I just want to watch it and not spend too much time with and write as I go. But I actually put a focus on that scene because in that scene, Constance Wu proves herself because she comes in. Everyone's like, "Wow!" Like it's a red carpet event. So they're going to Singapore, which is her boyfriend's homeland, because her boyfriend's best friend is having a wedding. The Christian thing I also want to get into because that came to me immediately when they led with that. I'm like, this is because Singapore is it has a slight plurality, I think, of Chinese ethnically, but it's also Malay, and like this movie shows in a weird way, South Asian. Right? There's a couple of scenes where it's pretty evident what they think about darker skinned Asians too. So there's like, I'll get to it. There's one scene where they come to the villa. I said it's like the Great Gatsby, but missing the point of the Great Gatsby. That's what I felt the movie was because it was like it was all this opulence and like fun part, which is fine. I actually don't mind that, but it just missed the point of what those stories are about. Because the Great Gatsby is about you get too close to the sun, you get killed for it. Like if you try to remake yourself, they won't let you go. You're not part of their clan. This is just party after party after party. They don't learn anything. Everything's great. So I thought that was hilarious to me, like rewatching a second time. But in that scene when Aquafina's, so really quickly, the Constance Wu wedding scene, I wrote this because this directly connects to our project. So the one lady who's nice to Constance Wu's character, because everyone else is sort of like, being kind of mean to her, and the mother, her boyfriend's mom, is annoying because there are moments when she's like culture, and I'm like, lady, you're not even originally Singaporean, technically. Like, what are you talking about? So that was very interesting to me how they made Singapore Chinese, even though it's a plurality of Chinese. But even then, I don't even know how much Christians there are. And then, because a lot of Chinese are not Christian, pure and simple. And then Malay are Muslim. And a lot of South Asians, I have family who live in Singapore. A lot of family are Hindu and Muslim. It's just weird. So that is very weird. But in that scene, she sits with Princess Intan, and you remember what she says to, because again, Constance Wu's character is not even poor. She's an economics professor at NYU, and that's fine. Like, you and I are academics, we understand it's not like a simple one-dimensional everyone's doing great.
Well, she's but she's meant, that's a very important point. But relative to these crazy rich Asians, she's meant to be the poor.
But in this case, that comes up for a reason, though, the economics. So she comes, because I think they also picked someone with her background to be sort of, yes, a contrast to the crazy rich Asians, but at the same time, she's still an economics professor. Because in this scene, yes, with Princess Intan, she says the way she makes a way of connecting with her where other people can't, because Princess Intan is very to herself. That's the woman on the left, on people's left. She says, "I read your great article on microloans in the Asian Economics Journal, because your microloans, because your microloans have been helpful to women, and women lift up economies."
Oh my
so
God.
I circled that because I was like, damn, that's crazy. They said that like in a movie that had nothing. So that's why I bring up the economics part, because that's what they were doing. Like, we need a character.
That is a really good point. And I heard that line, it registered, but I didn't write it. I didn't note it. So that's
crazy.
You're right.
So there's a little uprising there too. It's like, well, you got your microloans, and we know how microloans are. They're still pretty. They're not. They're not a revolutionary.
Solution.
No. And in fact, the guy who did the micro, I mean, it's a very complicated history of like the political opposition to him, because some of it is a little bit corrupt against him. But for the most part, Muhammad Yunus is the guy who won the Nobel Prize for microloans, right?
Yeah.
But he was in jail because the Bangladeshi government is also corrupt, and we're upset with him. But he's no angel too. Like, he's not exactly a winning guy. Like, the microloans was found out to be, even from people who weren't stupid enough to jail him, to be kind of a tenuous thing to promise to people. Like, in the end, what helps women, especially from peasant backgrounds and working class backgrounds, is not little microloans. It's macro revolution. It's like bigger things than that.
It was, and in fact, this is, man, you killed it right there. This is you just saved us, because I was sinking us in my limitations. So But no, this is it, because the microloan situation is really, because I remember years ago looking into it, and my headline was, it's not really any different than the arguments around giving Black people small business loans.
Mm-hmm.
It I know it's more complicated than that,
Mm-hmm.
but it ultimately doesn't, because as you said, if you're talking about overturning massive inequality, microloans and small businesses is not a solution. You need,
No.
and yeah. So that's a really good catch right there. That's exactly right. And that's sort of like, and that, and it's odd because that's like the turning point of the movie in terms of her coming into favor with the family.
And how does the movie start, though? It starts with, obviously, that stupid scene that I have complicated feelings about, because I'm like, yeah, get those white guys for being racist. But I'm also like, wait, but you're also siding with the rich white. And this is how liberals and some conservatives see the
Right.
issue of
Because
racism, too.
Sorry, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No. I just mean, this is how they see racism, too. It's
Mhm.
just a couple of yokels and rednecks
Mhm.
and whatever, right, who come into the frame. But all this is pretty until they
Because the
sully it
ruling
with their
elite,
shoes.
the ruling elite aren't racist. If you can, they'll let you in if you can get
Right.
there, because that's what the movie
Right.
is meant to also convey, that
Right.
at that level they're all friends, and that's why he greets her as saying, "I'm
Mhm.
happy to sell my hotel to my friend." And why would he be doing that, by the way? Like there's
Yeah, I
no,
don't know.
in the middle of the night you get a phone call and just sell your hotel because he's in his bath, like he's in bed.
We don't know, Jared. We don't know how the rich and famous
No,
really
obviously, I don't know how
operate.
this works, but I'm just saying, like, it was just, but to your point, like at that level, they're all friendly.
Mhm.
They're all good to
Yeah.
go. And uh actually, now I want to go back and watch that opening scene, not that scene, but the opening scene
The
where we
second
meet
one.
the protagonist, where she's teaching her
Yep.
economics course through a gambling lesson.
Yep.
And I didn't understand what she was doing. I admit I wasn't paying a lot of attention. But now with this whole microloan thing, I'm wondering if they didn't slip some other kind of nonsense into that scene.
They did.
Um,
They said, I'm gonna be honest with you. I just wrote notes. I just thought so that's the first scene with Eleanor Young and her family, and the boy grows up to be Bernard or something, or whatever his name is.
wait, but he's like the love interest.
Yeah, he becomes a
Yeah,
love interest. So that's the first, and then the second scene we get introduced to Constance Wu's character.
yeah.
And that's what you're describing. It's a blacklit room. We think it's a gambling den, but it turns out to be she's doing gambling, like teaching gambling in her classroom in NYU because she's teaching them about game theory or something.
Right,
But she
right.
says when people's emotions get in the way. So it's like very interesting because it comes all around to mahjong at the end, where they're doing again like around the gambling. So in the end, if you do want to, so it's a very pleasant idea of uprising and resistance. That's, in my opinion, quite deep. And I'm saying this as somebody who didn't get it until I got to that part. Because when that part came up, what I mentioned with Princess Eton, and I was like, they didn't have to put microloans in there. That's wild. So when they did that, I was like, oh shit. So then everything else started to feel very different. You know, with the gambling and the betting and the odds, it's very like, I think she says something about self-interest. So again, if you are a poor girl, poor woman, you can come up and fight back, but you also come through. It's still a capitalist story, like old money and new money. That's all it is. It's like, but she's also being like, you know, not so radical, right? She's a economics game theory professor who's interested in microloans. And again, why do they start off with the game theory? Like, it's so bizarre. They start off with gambling, but then they end with her saying like how she one-upped the other lady through gambling. Anyways, a lot of little tight messages, and then I have a lot of other notes because I actually took a decent number of notes also about darker Asian folks, because there is a scene where it was pretty clear what they thought about darker Asians or South Asians who are darker.
Are you talking about the scene where the help?
Yes,
Are
in the
brought in?
beginning.
Yeah. Go ahead, and because that's a really good point too.
I remember seeing. So this is the second time I watched it. I didn't realize how bad it was the second time. I remember watching the first time, and me and my partner were like, "Whoa," because okay. So Aquafina's character, who is really annoying, and Constance Wu's character, so she knows Aquafina as a separate. So that's the other thing. It almost makes sense that all the Asian folks who are in New York City who know something are Singaporean, because she met Aquafina on her own. Like they mentioned they went to the same college together. I'm like, how
Right.
many of
Right.
these rich Chinese Singaporeans do you know? So that's also very bizarre. I've not really met that many. I'm not, in that circle, I guess. But she went off to Singapore for her boyfriend, but she has a friend who's Aquafina who also lives there in a very opulent house. And then Aquafina's like, whoa, you're dating the Young family? I have to drive you there. So they go driving, and then the joke is like they're driving in the compound without noticing it because it's so big. And they see the big house, which I meant the Great Gatsby without more moral lessons, because the house is like opulent, it's very 1920s flapper. Some people are old jazz standard. That was the interesting thing I got from it. But the first thing is when they drive out of the house, she's arguing because they park. Like, I don't see the house. What do you think we should do? And then suddenly, dark music, like very like what's the word? Like scary music plays, like a very like boom, like it's like some sort of like you should be afraid kind of music. Like yeah. So it starts playing, and then these two darker guys drop their heads at the window and scare them, and it's a scary music. Oh, like it's meant to be. The music plays up into you're meant to be scared, and these guys are just darker skinned Sikh men who are guards, and they don't speak anything. They're mum. They're just like circling with their guns around the car like they're dogs, like as if they're not really human. It was so big. Like I'm saying, the second time I watched it, I was like, whoa, this is worse than I thought the first time. They're not speaking anything. They're way darker than I assumed first. I just thought they were just like maybe lighter skinned South Asians, but no, it's very apparent they're also darker. They have the beards and everything. They're just Sikh guys, and this is Singapore. South Asians are not a norm. They're everywhere. And then there's other instances where in that same wedding scenario where Constant Wu's character comes up with like a glow up and all that, when people are handling the doors and opening, they're all Indian or South Asian, darker skin, and they're darker. Like what I'm saying is that you can find a lot of Indians who are like me, a little bit like lighter skinned or brown. They intentionally also picked people who are darker. There was something bizarre. I'm like, if someone's putting like, I go off of what you've said and Matume and other folks have said about intentionality. Whoever did the recruiting for this film or decided on how the servants should look in those scenes made a big reason. Like it's purposeful and bizarre. Like the music was meant to be scary, and then these other people are just meant to be in the background, but you notice them sort of. And then all the other workers who are not dark, they're all in the background for the most part. They're just like furniture. Like
there was a scene, I missed the scene you're describing. I might have been looking away because sometimes I'm not always. I admit, like with this one, I wasn't fully locked
it's
in.
It's hard not to be
locked
into this.
But the one scene I remember noticing, and I was trying to get a screenshot of it, but I can't get it to pull up while we're on a stream, and all the protections, and I can't find a still photo of the scene either. But is I think during the wedding where now I can't remember exactly what was happening, but there's a point where the staff is called over to do something, and led by a small woman, they're all very dark skinned. And I remember looking at that and I was like, that's not odd. That's not the word I'm looking for. That's standard. I was like, but to your, and also I don't believe at all it's unintentional. Or I would say I would at least say it's unconscious in revealing.
That's true too. But not the first scene where there's foreboding. Someone put it the better description of the music. I couldn't quite describe foreboding music. There was foreboding music that was, because I initially watched it the first time, and the way I remembered it, I was offended. But I also was thinking they just put some people there. Aquafina jumped, and that's the reasoning why we associate negatively. No, there was foreboding music too. So the director is like really telling you like, oh, it's a couple of guys in turbans and they're just and it just pissed me off because I'm like, bro, like you couldn't even give them lines to like soften. Like they made them look like dogs, like animals. They were circling the car, and it was so bizarre, so funky. Because I'm like, that's the only time you see any of them get that close to anyone who's not Chinese. in that way. Because the other people who you're saying could be darker, they could also be other Chinese folks. Because again, I want to say to your Christian thing, this is a story about Christian Chinese comprador class people, because the amount of Christianity I was writing that, I'm so glad I mean, I knew you would say this, but because first thing I said was Christian, like with a question mark when the Bible study up. I'm like, what the hell? Like, I'm fine with but it was like everybody. And then the names Ollie, Bernard, Jacqueline, Astrid. I'm like, okay, I can take some of this, but is everybody who's Chinese? And the interesting thing, they're also then suggesting to this Constance Wu's character, oh, you're not really Chinese, you're American.
They
right?
call her a banana.
A banana. And
yellow
I'm like,
on the outside, white on the inside.
Also, that's funny to me, but this goes into what we argue what we're going to argue a bit in our paper and what we've said. But that's the thing. Maybe it's the trappings of like honesty, because at the end of the day, there is reality to a certain kind of nationalist Asian politics. Like, you can see this in India and other parts of the subcontinent, where they're like, women wearing jeans, Western. Having a billionaire, great, unquestioned. So again, capitalism is not Western. Capitalism doesn't make you a banana, which I find is an offensive term anyway, because it's like, what makes you liking punk music or something? I've seen it, like, people say that. I've unfortunately called other people that too when I was younger. So now I realize what I was doing. But no, but then capitalism is fine.
Yeah,
because development's fine.
And not just that, right. That's right. Because they want to convey to this woman that she's an outsider, a poor interloper, and inauthentic. But to your point, all of them have some sort of anglicized first name, at least.
And they went to Oxford.
They all went to Oxford or something like that. And then they all are in perfectly westernized business interest
all the time
sectors. And there was nothing in anything, even ceremonially, that pointed to something traditional.
No.
In Singapore, China, or anything. It was just extravagance. And they all either had British or American accents.
But also, not to be like, because the main character, the actual actor, he himself is, I think, of mixed heritage. I think he is Thai and English. And again, my partner and I watched this cooking show about people going into a part of their past. So I forgot, Issa Rae was on it too. It was actually moving. Like, she went, I forget where her origins are, but she went back home, and it was really moving, like meeting the aunts and everything. But then he was there, Henry Golding. And what's interesting in that instance, that we learned that he actually had no connection to his Asian side. It isn't like, I'm not blaming him, because he's making that effort, I guess, at this point, to try to do that. But what was interesting to me, and something that came to the mind of me and my partner, was because the story of his mother seemed kind of sad, like, because she was married to an Englishman, I think, and they went back to England at a time, I guess, at the 60s or 70s, not 1995 London. And, if you read anything about that era, like, I've learned from some other, Desi folks and Asian folks who would be described as Asian, they would be described as, quote unquote, racistly as just Chinese in the English context. But they would say, like, in the 50s, even, you didn't have anything even cultural food wise. Like, I think some people said that they have to, if they wanted to, like, survive, through good cooking, they had to, like, learn about an auntie having, like, a mini. So I'm just telling you, it was a very lonely experience, I could imagine, for her as being a Thai woman. And then I'm not blaming the husband, but it was a little weird. Like, they didn't try to make an effort. Like, I'm not blaming her, but it was a sad story. And then I kept thinking about that, because I watched that after watching this movie. Now looking back, I'm like, it's also interesting how they picked him. And then the accent is real. Like, the accent is real. They're picking, and the reason why I mentioned the Oxford thing, because Ken Jeong's character, when he does the fake, quote unquote, Chinese accent, which I wanted to slap him across the face. This man is a minstrel show.
And I've read a number like this, and I was happy that I've found over the couple of years that there is a significant Asian backlash against him.
Yeah,
like calling him out, and
he's a joke. Like, he's a joke. Every major character he's done has been bizarrely humiliating, and not self-effacing, humiliating. And he does these weird, like, even Community, the show. I remember I remember watching that character mutate into something. I didn't watch all those episodes, but I remember seeing like versions of the new whatever his character was and being like, what is going on? Like, it's been a minute since I watched it. In
I
this
watched
context,
all of
oh,
Community
you did? Yeah.
repeatedly. I love the show.
It's a good show in many ways, but
I'm not
his is a downfall.
I'm not looking for justification for my
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
behavior.
No,
I'm
no,
just
no, no, no,
saying that
no.
I
Yeah,
watched the
yeah.
show, so I know what you're talking about. And though that show went through a number of writer changes at one point and lost the original writer and then had to bring him back to save the show and all this,
Right.
there could be some argument that Ken's arc was affected by that. But the reality is it doesn't matter. He's really always doing the same thing. He does the same
Mhm.
thing on Masked Singer. He does the same thing in all these movies. He's playing the same kind of character, and it's always some Asian coon.
Right,
He's
right.
just cooning for and this is clearly why he's so welcomed and successful. And then for him to walk in and do that accent, I that's why I was writing. I was like, what is this?
And
is
he
this
says,
yeah.
and then he says, "Oh, I'm sorry. I'm just kidding with you." Like you said, I actually went to the United States too for UC
Yeah.
Davis or something for school. But it's like, again, the separate, like you said, the fact that he's like, a minstrel show is like he's because that scene was meant to say, because this whole movie was meant to be like, look, Asians aren't poor, which is also bizarre because I was on the impression, I was like, I think we have an issue with the broader audience thinking we are doing okay. So I'm like, when that movie first came out, I was confused by that. I know it's based on books, but I'm like, why is this a message we need? And then secondarily, he comes in, like you said, doing the thing where he's making fun of the audience who otherwise gave him his career. So that's why I was so confused when I watched it the second time with that thick accent. I was like, wait, are you making fun of quote unquote Americans because you did this?
No,
and
I took that as him saying, the way I took that scene was him introducing himself in the movie saying, white people, don't be confused by my appearance in this Asian film into thinking I'm anything different. I'm still the guy you have made me famous for. So he was saying to the white audience, I'm still doing your thing for you. I'm gonna come in here and do the Asian coon thing, and then and the movie itself is inviting of it because it wants to portray this idea that Asians can be white too, Asians can be rich too. And I mean, we've seen black versions of this in historically. I can't think of anything off the top of my head, but a famous scene where the black person comes in and is more rich than people think, and then can get away with this, that, or the. We've seen versions of this, is my point, and with a few adjustments. Again, it's a kind of paint by numbers, taking some rom-com elements, some pre-existing U.S. centric, at least racial coding, and then putting an Asian story in it. And then again, you get a lot of the same tropes around wealth and access. And again, with the standard being the Western colonial order is right. And it's how many of us can catch up to it and take advantage of it.
Well, they're also doing the thing that gets that like Claire Jean Kim and others criticize, but they're also trying to essentialize Asian culture.
Yeah, let's do that. Let's shift now.
I still want to talk about the movie, but I do have like,
okay, my bad. Okay, no, say what you want to say. My bad. But
no, we can connect it, is what I mean. I was just going to say, she brings up the fact that what gets taken up as Asianness itself is essentialized, like, because they're portraying themselves as the real authentic Asians. Of course, that gets distorted and challenged by Constance Wu, who I also want to add, her character makes no sense because she makes dumplings with the family, and all that stuff for the first time, which is, I don't know what their life is like. I'm not trying to be too much, but I'm like thinking, you grew up in Queens, like what is this like? How it was like this? It was also like portraying New York City as this bizarre place that didn't exist to me. Like, Queens is known for being really Asian and Asian.
Oh, right. The idea that she could grow, Chinese in Queens and not be introduced to some dumplings is,
It was bizarre.
Yeah. And her mother, again, who we do meet is not someone disconnected from her own past. So it's the idea that her own mother wouldn't have prepared her to do dumplings or to. And then honestly, maybe this will answer my confusion here, because I know, again, I wasn't watching this super focused, and there was some point they're explaining the lie around her mother's character, and I lost track of what was being said there. So maybe that would explain why her mother wasn't passing on these traditions.
I don't know. I just wrote down, and I'm just laughing because listen, I also drifted off a couple of times because I'm like, I can't take this because
the movie is so fucking dumb.
It's so bad. Like, even as a rom-com, it's so nonsensical because I'm like, so the biggest hurdle you have to climb is your boyfriend is really rich and he may want to stay in Singapore, but who knows? But also I'm confused as to what he does for a living, because unless the family is going to cut him off, which did not seem the case.
That was never threatened.
No, there was no real dilemma. So I'm just like confused. I'm like here miserable, like in terms of like my health.
Well, I mean,
like,
the dilemma
money.
was that again, we've seen this before. The dilemma was the mother-in-law doesn't like her and says, you gotta leave. And then he has the thing of, well, do I tell him? No, I don't want to tell him because it'll hurt his relationship with his mother. And then she does the magnanimous thing. And then of course he comes and runs and proposes to her on the plane. I mean, the whole
that part was hilarious because I forgot about that part. I was like, whoa, this is really the same
and even
thing.
to the point where they have the heavy set older Chinese woman playing the comic relief at the point of his proposal. Like we've seen all the one.
Who was that?
My point is she's a cliche. She's a trope.
Yeah.
Character. We've seen in so many movies since my childhood where she's the character standing behind the protagonist saying, yes, say yes.
Marry him. Yes.
That one. That's the one. And I'm like, that's why I was like, no, that's why I'm saying you, from my perspective, humbly, you saved this segment of our discussion by pointing out the point about the microloans piece that I had just, I did make a mental note as I saw the scene, but I didn't write it down. I didn't focus on it because other than that, and bringing out that kind of a gem to make the point for our project, this movie, again, they really, in many ways, I would argue it's additionally, given the long history of Orientalism in Hollywood, shout out to Edward Said and you know, that all this film is, it's really disrespectful to the entire Asian community on top of the rest of us as an audience who are being abused. But because it's just saying, same thing with probably the book from the publishing industry. We want to tap into this market.
Right.
So we want to do it in the way we've always tapped into any market, which is on the basis of some Western silly trope cliche nonsense. So whoever wrote the book, they said that's exactly, of course we're going to turn this into a movie. I mean, it was probably written for that to have happened in the first place. Whoever wrote it was probably thinking they're gonna make this into a movie. I'm about to get rich. I'm about to be a real rich, crazy Asian or whatever. Real crazy rich Asian.
And it's authentic. That's the thing. Like the richness and the Asianness, that's tied together in this movie. There's no questioning of the wealth. So Asian values could
be crazy Asian buying power. That's
yes. The thing about the dumpling scene was so telling is like, look at these nice Asians who are Christian. That's very important. Who are Christian and who go to Oxford, but they retain their values, not by helping other Asian folks in Singapore, not by doing it. No, that's stupid. They're only pig farmers, as they said, as Aquafina said. They're before this land was just pig. And I was thinking of it the whole time when that happened. The second time, I was like, it wasn't. I mean, even if it was, be proud of it. My family's like a peasant background. I don't.
But you can't be proud of it because it's Asian Zionism.
Right. I forgot.
The people with no land. They were just pig farmers. They're not doing nothing with the land. I'm going to come here and make it rich and valuable and worth something.
Which is also fake Singaporean history. That's the other thing. If you know something, so the other thing that was about the authentic. So that scene with the dumpling was interesting because they still are like, look at these good Asians, because in the end they're still making dumplings together. And I'm like, no rich household is choosing make this many dumplings together. You know what I mean? Like that's also, but there's a reason why
Maybe they
did
do
that.
one ceremonially before they pass it off to the staff.
Other. Exactly. I'm like, this is not even making sense. But that's the whole point of the movie. Look, they still retained. This isn't a lot of Bollywood cinema too from the old. I've not watched Bollywood in a while. My family, my mom is the one who speaks like 7 million languages, so she knows Hindi and Urdu and and Rajasthani and like Marathi and Bengali, of course. My dad, he tries, but he knows English and Bengali and he understands Hindi. I just know Bengali and I understand a little bit of Hindi, but he always occasionally looks over at me with a smile when I'm watching a movie with them. Like, do you understand? I'm like, what are you talking about? If I understand, you don't. But he's like, do you understand this? So anyway, there is some tropes in those movies too, where they have
what I found.
Yes, that's the one.
This is a whole post about the dumpling.
The meaning, how meaningful it is.
So, well, it's just the behind the scene photos of the Crazy Rich Asians dumpling scene from my personal collection. So this is from I guess they're in the film, this actor or no, this is the director, right? John M. Chu.
Oh, that's the director.
So
love it.
So
I've got to stop being so sarcastic, but it's meaningful.
So here we don't see the colorism in the staff in this one. I was hoping to find a picture because there was one scene where it's so clear.
I remember a little bit, but I think at that point I was done with the movie, so I was like, let's just wrap this up. This is crazy. After the microloan edition, I was like, I'm done. I don't know what I can think about. But that movie was meant to be the authentic self, right? That's in Bollywood cinema too, in Hindi cinema, where they have this is a rich ass Desi family, and but don't worry, they wear saris of a certain type, and they do this and this, right? So that was funny to me, but also again, save or not, like I'm just doing the stuff that you guys do, that you've done to movies, where you pick it apart successfully. And I also remember what I think Erica Keynes had said this a while ago, with also how there's a tendency in Hollywood where they also suggest a timeline that doesn't exist. So for example, with like Black Panther and these newer-ish movies, there's a suggestion that we never had Black heroes in film, right? So there's that one level. So they're trying to, which is, true to an extent, but we had Blade and we had other people. So it's the same thing here. So they're like trying to suggest like, this is the only time where it's like a major Asian, like it's the biggest one. It's backed by Hollywood, but we had other films here and there. They're like a little bit, like there's like this is it. And then the other retelling of the story is the Singaporean story. Singapore is an island of comprador class. Like, it doesn't have any like actual like resource. Like Singapore wanted to stay with Malaysia. It was Malaysia's fault for saying we don't want you. I didn't look into it why, but that was Malaysia's fault. And then there was a time where it broke them apart. But you know what they did? Like if you read Vijay Prasad's like books on the Bandung Conference and Tricontinental, Singapore was invited to the Bandung Conference, I believe, but they were like, them and Pakistan were actually chided by the other 50 countries because they were taking money from the US. They were advertising themselves as more than just paddy fields. So this story, because that story that Aquafina tells, which I hate, they suggest that the paddy fields diminished through the Young family. No, the paddy fields and the so-called pig farmers, they were still there up until the 40s and 50s, until the CIA money came through and said, we're going to use Singapore to be our little advancement of don't go communist, go this way. Or let's use it as a method to leapfrog into other areas, because Thailand was there, Singapore was there. So again, that was really interesting to me. They were trying to because this movie was also a tourism movie for Singapore, and they were trying to redevelop a history of Singapore that also proved its authenticity, because what's less authentic than getting money from the CIA? I just want to say that.
Just quickly, 2 quick Google AI searches said that Singapore by 2020 has become 20% Christian, and that it was not an independent participant in the 1955 Bandung Conference. It was still a British Crown colony at the time.
Oh, wow. So it must have been a later one, but they were chided. I think I remember seeing them in somewhere where they were had another conference, and they were like, Pakistan and them were not, they were not happy participants. Like a lot of other countries were like, we blame you. We're being non-aligned, but we don't like what you're doing. You're not, you're being aligned. So yeah. But anyway, they didn't change until later. They didn't
Yeah.
change until the father of the nation, or whoever his name was. I forgot his name.
So yeah, I don't pretend to know much about that region's history. So you know, thankfully I can watch films like Crazy Rich Asians to get my history and be caught up. But look, I honestly I really didn't. You know, we've made, and particularly you've made a good work out of this film, but I honestly didn't think we would spend this much time on it because it's trash. And the article that you sent, the first one, I did get to read at least a good bulk of it. For some reason, the PDF is not manipulatable. So I couldn't do my notations on it the way I like to. So when I tried to find another copy of it, I ended up finding the article which is really just the summary of a book that maybe we should get.
Either one works for me too.
It sounds interesting, but But why don't we do this? Why don't you take a moment and introduce everybody to this concept from this article that we were working with, The Racial Triangulation of Asian Americans by Claire Jean Kim. This was originally published in 1999. Although I think, but in the other article I sent, they reference work from hers that's even earlier than this. But it's fascinating and anyway, I think very important. So, and helpful. So I'll let you start if you like, and then yeah, we can go from there.
Yeah, no, the reason why I think this is really pertinent is because so Claire Jean Kim, right now, I think, because we have a book by her. This is her latest work, Asian Americans.
Hold on a second.
This one,
Asian Americans and Anti-Black World. Oh, right, yeah. Didn't I get that book?
Yeah. So
I haven't started it clearly, but I do have the book. I didn't even.
I'm the same way about a lot of these things. I swear, I was like, oh, that's a good. I went to a bookstore recently, and my partner's gonna watch this, but hopefully she won't get upset. But I went to the bookstore recently and I was looking at a book. I was like, damn, that book looks so good. I didn't buy it. I'm just telling her, I didn't buy it. I come back home and I was like looking through the shelves and I was like, oh damn, I do have it. So yep, that's, you know.
I didn't. So you didn't buy it again.
I didn't buy it again. So I'm letting her know I didn't buy it again. But I did have a moment where I was like, that's a really good book. And I was like, oh, but something's telling me not to get. So I totally get it. But this is the latest one. I've only started reading it, so I'm not like really ahead at all. But just to give a background on her, she is currently a professor of political science, the field I'm in, and Asian American study at UC Irvine. So I actually got a chance to interview her too for a piece I did. A long time ago. I think I forwarded you the article only because I was like, I think I remember. No, it's fine. It's fine. I was like, no.
I'm just getting exposed today. Like, damn it.
I know. I'm like, next thing I was like, oh, I also gave her an email for you, and she responded like, no, none of that happier. Like, we
hung out and we had dinner together. Oh wow.
You're just consumed by Crazy Rich Asians, how bad it is.
Oh my god.
But no, it's on. But I just remember, like, I did interview her. So I interviewed her just to say she's a hero of mine in many aspects, and she's doing the work, and she's written that book I just showed, and that's recent, like 2025. She also wrote this book, which is Bitter Fruit,
the politics, Black Korean conflict. Yeah, that's so they referenced that in one of these articles. Yeah. But I haven't read that either. So this is dope. Yeah.
This one is a classic. I read this right after going into the PhD program because this is the kind of the work I do with coalitions of color. And I read this one at least. And this one came a year after this article. So this article was probably preceding that in terms of her thinking. So she's a great writer, great thinker and theorist. And she has been a huge influence on me. And she's really kind. Like, I did get to interview her for an article about the POC label, how useful it is. And she's just really great. If I was like her, I would just not even care to answer emails anymore. I'd just be like to myself, and she's really great. So I want to shout her out for doing this kind of work for like a long time. But the article and the concept, so racial triangulation is basically, so in her mind, she says there's and this is 1999. By this point, there has been the tendency in ethnic studies to a degree in social science to suggest that either groups of color are racialized in not completely, but in a vacuum. Like we have our own intense individual issues. Like African Americans had to contend with chattel slavery, indigenous folks with land disposition, Asians with migration, yada yada yada. She's not really for that. She thinks that's a bit oversimplistic. But she also says there is the other side where some, rightfully also have talked about a hierarchy, though, where not everyone's on the same hierarchy, but it's like stratified very much like a top and a bottom. Racial triangulation complicates both of these things because, one, it says nothing is in a vacuum. The way that Asians are racialized is connected to how Black folks are racialized, and how Black folks are racialized is connected to how other groups are racialized, yada yada. So that's one element of this theory that she hopes to correct. And then the other element about the hierarchy part is that in her mind, the hierarchy shifts though. I mean, whites are always at the top and there's always a bottom. And most often, unfortunately, Black folks are there in the US context. But sometimes there is a shifting. So in her mind, she says, like for example, Asians, particularly East Asians, on some level have obviously been valorized, as she says, culturally. So even when Chinese folks were migrating by the 1850s and then after the 1860s and 1870s, they obviously did not get a lot of rights or any rights. But if you look at some of the examples she gave of white racists back then, they were saying things like, well, clearly they have a civilization though. And then they obviously use a few choice words and awful words for Black folks than these people. So that's the valorized. But what she complicates by then is the foreignness, insiderness. So, but she does say, like, which is kind of realistic to a degree in the modern world, how Asians could be valorized for a cultural positive thing that Asians do, but still are not civically included. So they can still be viewed as foreign. And then in some instances, African Americans particularly, can sometimes be considered, at least on this level, an insider in that way. Although this is where we can talk about some of the things that I would change up about the language, because I think insider is a bit too strong. And I do think in the modern era, I do think there's now a little bit of precarity in terms of who's an insider civically for everybody. Even indigenous folks are being, taken up by ICE. So like there's a little bit of that gray, but that's where she comes in. And it's true, like I've been in situations where, at least for me, where I've seen because those ads from these really anti-immigrant groups, they sometimes use African Americans to talk about how they're left out, and there are conservatives who do that. They often talk about, and people on the channel, Black Liberation Channel, and your channel, they talk about foundational Black Americans as an identity. And I think 2 days ago, the morning show talked about how that term came up on an ABC News report. So that's what Claire Jean Kim kind of predicted.
Oh no, Tucker Carlson has jumped in too. Like he's helping platform them. He's doing the whole thing. So like they're fully welcomed in. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's basically it in that sense.
So let me just share a little bit from the article, and then this other one that I looked at, because there was. So she says here in this one, recently the call to go beyond Black and white in discussions of race has become something of a mantra in scholarly circles. The conventional trope of two nations, Black and white, crafted and reproduced over the past half century by Gunnar Myrdal, the Kerner Commission, Andrew Hacker, and others, seems increasingly outdated as unprecedented levels of Asian and Latin American immigration continues to diversify the U.S. population. So that's sort of, again, where the starting point. Mm-hmm. And there's repeated reference to this moving beyond the binary of Black white, but at the same time, what I think is interesting, and I want to skip ahead to this, she's saying that that foundational binary, so to speak, if I'm interpreting this correctly, between white and Black is what governs, with the goal of keeping white people superior, is what governs the relationship to Asians, and how they are, as she graphs it here, grafted, slated above Black people, but not as superior as whites. And I even started to interpret this or thought I was that the way she's grafted this here by not having it be a direct line, a direct hierarchical line, is she's trying to show some of the flexibility and the complexity of where Asians fit in and how they're played against Black people, all in service of white superiority.
Right.
I don't know if you agree, if I got that right. Again, playing catch up to this one as well. But what I also like about her work, as I've been introduced to it, is that she brings a political economy to it.
Mm-hmm.
So she talks about moments, and this was, I think, more clear for me in this other one. Share screen. In this other article, which is really the, I guess, the introduction to this book, Politics, Groups, and Identities.
It's a journal, yeah.
Or is this a journal article, like a special journal article looking at her book? Okay, so this is like the introductory essay for that journal. Claire Jean Kim's Racial Triangulation at 20, Rethinking Black Asian Solidarity and Political Science. So 2 quick points, if I can make them quickly. One is this point about how she points to particular moments in history as necessitating labor force adjustments, moving from particularly out west, a Black population to an Asian one, and that this need of white business to bring Asians in to sort of play this buffer and to create this new labor force that could be abused, but not different from the way the abuse was carried against Black people and used to, again, put those two groups against one another, defending white, I thought was fascinating. And then this, so I maybe we can come back to that. But this other point that I thought, and you would appreciate it more than me, obviously, is the way she calls out political science as a field. As being problematic in addressing itself. And I thought this point here was that she makes about that was really important, that the author here writing about her says, Kim provides us with necessary tools to be skeptical of the discipline that is political science's incentives to focus on the individual as the core unit of analysis. What Hawksworth calls methodological individualism, which I thought was fascinating. I hadn't considered this. I'm not a political scientist, but that the fields, but it did remind me actually, because of his recent passing and my use of his work in one of my classes, that Michael Parenti, the late great political scientist, made this point about the field of political science, not in this exact way, but saying that the field itself had methodological flaws preventing it from reaching the more appropriate and radical conclusions. And this seemed to make that point, that this focus on the individual experience as a point or a unit of analysis would be a massive problem in missing some of the broader contextual overlaps, impacting different groups, I guess is where I'm going with that. But so I just wanted to introduce some of that and get your thoughts, and we can come back to some of the details if you like. But I just thought that stuff was fascinating.
No, I agree. I mean, that's the thing that I really, because even in Bitter Fruit, she talks about the economic reasons why the boycott started with Korean store owners, at least, and how it metastasized through a media environment, through other issues, through political. She's very much about the broader scheme of things, imposing itself on people. For me, about the migration thing, this is something I stress to my students about migration. Like, I always joke with them about Lin-Manuel Miranda, and I always talk about how there's a Lin-Manuel Mirandization of Immigration Story, which is like, that song, like, what we We Made It or something. I don't know, but it always gets remixed or something.
Yeah,
That one song.
yeah.
And it's always about like, because it got remixed also, interestingly. I know it's supposed to convey the hardship of immigration and being proud of that. But I remember it got remixed into a song with Riz Ahmed and other people I like. And in one of the scenes, it was like a bunch of like brown dudes like in a train car stuffed, like it wasn't comfortable, and they were like, singing and dancing like we're proud of where we came from. But I'm like, that is so Lin-Manuel Miranda that this song is now used to whitewash the horror of immigration. And what I stress to my students is like, immigration is really about just jobs, work, what regions have been destabilized. And it's something Jean Kim brings up. So from Erica Lee's book, who's a historian of Asian American history, and what's cited also by Kim in this work about racial, the reason why you had even Chinese migrants coming wasn't because they heard about America or the US and was like, I gotta get there. It was because they were actively recruited by US businesses, because a few things, one of which was the Chinese royal family was ceding off control, losing control of their really vast empire. And that empire was being destabilized to such a degree that they had to offload people, because those people would lead more unrest. And the people recruiting them from these US based companies were like, well, we can take them, and like, if we abuse them here, they're thousands of miles away, and who's really going to stand up for them? And that's what Kim sort of says too about Chinese labor being valorized, to the sense of like, we can use them. They're such industrious people, but also at the end, that's just a fake cultural quality to obscure the fact that they just know they can exploit them heavily. And that is I again, back to the political economy part, she's very, very, I actually forgot about how in depth it goes in that level, like in terms of her thinking.
Yeah, I mean, again, this is my introduction to her work, and it's clear she's sharp and gets into. So quickly back to that first article, just to make things a little bit more clear, if I can, for myself and others. She's her work in this point of triangulation of Asian Americans is a critique of what she describes as two dominant broad approaches to going beyond black and white, which he says both are filled with shortcomings. So the first involves what we've talked about, sort of as you outlined, the sort of racial hierarchy of abuses, or the different ways various groups have been oppressed. That, as you've talked about, with the genocide of Native Americans, colonized Mexicans, enslaved Africans, Asians faced exclusion, and so on. This other approach that she describes is I made a note here, is what we saw, I thought is what we saw in Crazy Rich Asians, where the second approach, which I call the racial hierarchy. So the first approach wasn't the hierarchy, it was the different forms of suffering. The second one is the hierarchy, where she's saying, which emphasizes the ordering of groups into a single scale of status and privilege, with whites on the top, blacks on the bottom, and all other groups somewhere in between. Gary Okihiro's argument that Asian Americans have been rendered an intermediate group on America's bipolar racial scale, and Mari Matsuda's claim that Asian Americans constitute a racial bourgeoisie. That's what I was seeing with Crazy Rich Asians, implying such a hierarchy. She's saying that there are shortcomings to all of this, and says that the problem with the different trajectories approach is that it imputes mutual autonomy to respective racialization processes that are in fact mutually constitutive of one another. Asian Americans have not been racialized in a vacuum, isolated from other groups. To the contrary, Asian Americans have been racialized relative to and through interaction with whites and blacks. As such, the respective racialization trajectories of these groups are profoundly interrelated. The problem with the racial hierarchy approach, on the other hand, is that its notion of a single scale of status and privilege is belied by the fact that whites appear to have ordered other racial groups along at least two dimensions or axes historically. Yeah, so I again just wanted to give some more of an outline to what she's doing here, and her approach, and so she says here, my purpose in this paper is twofold. First, I propose that we use the notion of the field of racial
Mm-hmm.
positions in order to move the conceptualization of racial dynamics beyond black and white. So a field of racial positions. Second, I argue that Asian Americans specifically have been racially triangulated vis-a-vis whites and blacks in this field of racial positions for the past century and a half. And then she turns to a discussion of that in the rest of the article there.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
yeah. No, it's if anyone's interested, the article is not that um tough to read because she does do a lot of like historical work to explain it. Like her article has a lot of history in it, which is
Mhm.
really good. And then she also has some cultural critiques, some I think pop cultural critiques, and then of course it goes into the modern era, which is 1999, but it's very familiar. I think one of the takeaways I took was that she talked about and predicted how Asians were being valorized again for being so quote unquote culturally competent. They don't need affirmative action, and this is
Mhm.
through Reagan's time.
Who died
And
during my wedding.
I was
Thank
about
you.
to yeah. Shout out to your wedding.
Thank you.
So love does conquer all. And then she she but it's interesting because I also wrote down a link of like because Reagan was explicit, I guess, in terms of talking about and his conservative neocons were very explicit about Asians suffering under the weight of affirmative action. It kind of reminded me a little bit, and we can dovetail into this later, but it also reminded me of the new age of like how the right wing misuses anti-Semitism. Like that was the other thing that was kind of fascinating to me. Like, even Pam Bondi, I think in her hearing yesterday, called the hearing anti-Semitic or something bizarre. So I thought that was very interesting how groups get taken up that way and how maybe real things get turned into just a circus. So I thought of that as something that came to mind. But nonetheless, we had the Harvard case come recently where, again, Asian Americans had a real reason to be upset because some of the Harvard folks who did admissions called them robotic through some, they called them like very simple tropes. But then again, there were some Asian Americans who are racist and full of it, and are awful because they sided with these white people who use, because the point of what she's saying isn't like, this isn't a strategy that withholds the fact that they're dealing with Asians. They put it front and center. I think that's what's interesting about her approach. She's not saying, oh, they're hiding the fact that some Asians are involved. They're saying, no, it's racist because Asians are being oppressed. So I think that's what makes it so interesting and so valuable, because this is the new age of like some modicum of diversity, but at whose cost and what interest. And then I want to add something about a couple of people we mentioned. So she's taking work, I believe, using work that's very impactful from a couple of Asian scholars too, like one of whom is mentioned there, Mari Matsuda, I think is one of the co-founders of critical race theory. And I also want to say I interviewed her through a Google Doc or something. Again, another great person. Like she's, I think in Hawaii, I think just doing her thing, and another great person who is just, doesn't get talked about enough. And I also have our students read that article of racial bourgeoisie because I think it's still very relevant and important. So I just want to give a shout out to her. She doesn't really need it, but I'm just saying. And of course, Erica Lee and May Nai. May Nai is this, I don't want to get up, but May Nai is a writer of Impossible Subjects. That's a really great book on the so-called idea of illegal and legal immigration. And it's a really formative work, which I think Claire Jean Kim is referencing to. So those are also other things people could read into, which are great books. They really changed my view on things. I wanted to get back to the political science thing real quick because I do have a bone to pick with my field. They do love surveys, and that's what she says, and that's what they say in the thing. They love surveys, and I'm not against survey. I'm not a postmodernist. Like, what does numbers tell us? I do think numbers tell us something, right? There's a danger to being going too far down that road, but what she's arguing, and what these other people who are great saying she does argue is, with surveys you get a snapshot of something, right? So with the bitter fruit example, with her discussion about African Americans, Haitians, Caribbean folks, Black folks in New York City in the early 1990s, and Korean folks and white folks and every other group, maybe a survey would come out saying, oh, maybe some African Americans would say some harsh things about Asians. Maybe, I don't know. But somebody back then could use it and say, see, they're just being racist. But what the Jean Kim analysis would say, well, that's a snapshot of something. There's a context you're missing on purpose. what's going on here, right? What's actually happening? So I think in political science, I've seen it. Surveys are there now to be used to say immigration, like there are some surveys that have been used to suggest the American population is anti-immigrant, yada, yada, yada. But even in those contexts, it's extremely of a snapshot quality. And there is no broader lens to say, well, what kind of immigrant, for example? I've had discussions with people saying, yeah, the survey might be right that immigration is an issue to some, and they don't, and the people promoting it are saying that's a bad thing. They, Americans should be more pluralistic. But also, can we be a bit more specific about what kind of immigrant? And that's the Kim approach that I think is so valuable. And people do it in political science, but not enough. But political science doesn't do politics. Can I just be honest? I do politics, maybe. I'm giving maybe too much dap to myself, but I'm a junior scholar. But there's a lot of people on my committee do politics. So I want to give shout out to them. But there's a lot of people who think they're doing politics. But if you want to learn about politics from political science, don't just assume. You got to really read into the person doing it, right? Because what you get sometimes is a lot of deification of America and the US, a lot of naturalization through omission. For example, there's no discussion about capitalism sometimes in these classic texts. There's a famous text by Roald Dahl. I might be, I always get him confused with that other writer, but there's a guy, Dahl, who wrote this book called On Democracy and Other Classics. He did change his mind, by the way, and said he was being a bit naive. But there's a famous book that we still have to read in the field that suggests that America is pluralistic. And in that book, even though labor comes up, it's a focus on someplace around Brown, maybe Yale, the Yale area, New Haven. But capitalism does not really come up. It's just assumed that in a pluralistic democracy, whatever that means in the 50s, you should have all sides heard. So again, political science sometimes does not do politics. And I love the field for many other reasons, but I just wanted to come to that because I found it so amusing and fun to see that little section, because I was like, that's amazing, because that's true. We don't sometimes do politics. We instead do snapshots of moments and deification of the standard routine of what makes America great, except the more maybe liberal version.
No, thank you for that. Well, all I would want to add to that is that all the fields in Western academia have many flaws associated with, the imperial lens. But if I can, I want to come back to this, make a few more points from this article here, this one from Sonia Chen and Christian Hossam that's talking about Kim's work. And to your point, I haven't read Bitter Fruit, but the context of it, the Black Korean conflict in New York City and around the 1990 Red Apple boycott, where Black activists and community members in New York City protested the assault of Haitian customer Ghislaine Felicant by Korean store owner Bong Ok Jang, astutely pinpoint white racial power's frequently invisibilized hand in setting terms for interracial conflict. And in describing some of the way that the press and New York responded to this incident, the authors here write that mainstream journalists, pundits, Kim writes, they quote Kim, mainstream journalists, pundits, and officials used colorblind talk to champion the Korean merchants, deflect charges or racism from the system, and condemn the boycotters as criminals, demagogues, and reverse racists. In this way, the boycott was silenced and the American racial order ritualistically reinforced. So as I interpreted this for our work, it's the same thing narratively happening with discussions in pop culture and the press and unfortunately many Black outlets of the success of Asians in overcoming their adversity and tapping into their culture and businessing themselves into an improved condition. It again, as it says here, invisibilizes the what I would, the white hand of racial capitalism or colonialism here in the United States, and puts things back into pitting one group against the other and encouraging Asians to be seen as superior, not quite as good as whites, but definitely better than Black. And then here's the same thing, juxtaposing the entrepreneurialism and pluck of Asian Americans with the confrontation and rage of Black people. This is exactly the same thing that still happens narratively with these comparisons, even when they're carried by Black communicators. That, you know, they're saying, in effect, we need to stop being angry and stop, you know, protesting and doing all this. We need to do like the Asians and just get back to our business sense. And then, you know, we can have little Africas and little Black towns, and like they have Koreatown and Chinatown, you know, that kind of thing. And that is encouraged. And part of my argument and what I'm liking about what we're doing here for my own selfish focus or narrow focus is that so much of my argument is around how Black spokespeople are, under the guise of their Blackness, carrying very white, capitalist, conservative, reactionary attitudes and ideas into the work, following this same logic that's being described here, where, again, the emotionalism and the rage of Black people is juxtaposed negatively against the calm, cool, you know, focused entrepreneurialism of the Asian community. Again, the vaguely defined Asian community, you know, just any Asian will do for the comparison type thing, you know. So
well, can I just add really quick, because I mean, I don't think he gets a lot of read from Black folks in the US, but in Kim's original article, she does cite Thomas Sowell for saying that same exact point you said, which is, he literally says, so the model minority, she gives a lot of history in this for a 25, 35 page article. So the model minority trope started by like New York Times and other liberal associated paper. That's also important. And they started with Japanese Americans. They went into Japanese American communities that may have like done a little bit better recovering from incarceration. The adversary thing, I also want to get, I highlighted that what you said, because for some of these whites too, they actually argued that the adversity was maybe a necessary step for these Japanese Americans. They like toughened them up. So in a sense, also Asians are great of a certain type because they survived and it was necessary. So they weirdly suggested it was not a bad thing that happened. It was almost like science. It needed to happen. So that's another interesting thing that comes up in the article a minute. So I didn't get that the first few times I read. I was like, yeah, wow, they really admits to like, oh, maybe it helped. It got them closer together or something. But the other funny thing, which you said about, you know, common collective versus Black folks, too much politics. Thomas Sowell literally says in her article, she cites him saying, he said like Japanese Americans are doing well because they're doing less politics. So that's his call. I just love how she also dropped him in there. And I just love the fact that she's like, yeah, here he is. Like, this is what he said. But the other interesting thing, how they also describe Asians too, there is still a very weird sense of Asian Americans being common collective and almost not human, like robotic. And that's also something that Jean Kim cites in terms of like, even when they're valorizing certain, and this is particularly to East Asian Americans, they valorize them. They say, oh, they're basically just, you know, able to like computers, like able to like take in information and just with no emotion do the right thing, which is insanely insensitive. And also with Thomas Sowell, the suggesting that, again, we know this because we're sensible. Yeah. He's suggesting that Black folks are not doing well because they do too much politics is laughable as well. Like,
she quotes him. She says, thus conservative author Thomas Sowell writes, those minorities that have pinned their greatest hopes on political action have made some of the slower economic advances.
As if they weren't repressed. Right.
Yeah, right. This is in sharp contrast to the Japanese American, whose political powerlessness may have been a blessing in disguise by preventing the expenditure of much energy in that direction. So at least she correctly identifies him as a conservative author.
I love that. I forgot he was in there. Yeah.
Whereas, as opposed to the apolitical non-citizen coolies who are being toasted once again as an alternative to politically assertive Blacks. So she seems to be, again, I haven't had a chance to finish this article and read it as closely as I need to, but she seems to be catching it and calling it out appropriately, because she also quotes William Julius Wilson,
Mm.
who unfortunately has confused some of our greatest Black thinkers of today, like Killer Mike. But she catches him as because she quotes him here: by emphasizing internal sources of success or failure, both myths decisively shift attention away from structural determinants of group outcomes, including institutionalized white dominance. And 75 here is a reference to William Julius Wilson, whose arguments are very much like that. Like, this isn't who wants to shift away, attention away from structural determinants, including institutionalized white dominance, and have everything focused back on the underclass and urban poverty and the ghetto and all of this other stuff. It's basically William Julius Wilson is the Black Daniel Moynihan.
Right.
Oh my goodness. So, but anyway, so she's on it. So salute. Yeah. And I'm glad you've been able to build and can co-sign her decency. Because she's catching it, and yeah, I can't. I definitely need to. So we are going to read her book as part of our project, her new book.
Yeah.
Because this is, again, from my humble vantage point, this is the level of analysis that we need to approach. Like, I haven't certainly done her work justice today, but this is the direct trajectory we need to be pointing ourselves and as many others toward, in terms of trying to make these assessments to the extent we should even endeavor them, comparing Black and Asian groups, that we can't. What I also like about what I'm learning in this is that to your point, going back to your point about Soul and the New York Times and the construction of the model minority, we are sort of approaching the foundational origins of these nonsensical claims, that are carried through film and podcast well into the 21st century. This is some wild. That's wild. And I'm also kind of pissed a little bit. I'm a little bit pissed that I haven't that I haven't been encouraged to this scholarship before, or found it, or because but I blame the environment that's producing the mythology. Like, instead of saying, why aren't we reading this work and making an analysis, we just get, it's the same kind of thing. Let's just point to tropes and mythologies around economics and model minorities, and walk away from institutional causes of inequality.
I think it's a siloing of just fields, maybe, and also, since she's considered to be a political scientist and an Asian American scholar, because in the end, she's in the Asian American Studies program, but like, even the things that she's attacking is beyond both, right? It's it's African American, it's other groups. So personally, I also got the right educators in front of me for that sense of it, and I think she's taught by one of my mentors. But I would argue, other than some people I really trust, and maybe some of us who are in the race and ethnic politics subfield of political science, I don't think she's really that read as much in the broader field either. She also has another interesting book about food culture. It's called Dangerous Crossings. I haven't read. So she dabbles. And with Bitter Fruit, I do want to say it's interviews, by the way. Like, it's not just like what I think happened here. This article, as you can tell, I think she was basically in the midst of writing her book and doing the interviews, and then used some of that to analyze a little bit of what she was saying in terms of, but in that book, Bitter Fruit, she did in-depth interviews of both sides, or multiple sides. Like, she interviewed people of the December 12th movement, the Black Power movement that was involved in the boycotting. She interviewed them. And she also then interviewed the Korean Americans and Korean shop owners, who were split in some regard. There were some Koreans, minority of them, who said maybe we should make overtures and swing past what our tendency to go running towards the white liberal and conservative media sphere. Because the other thing that's interesting, this is New York City under Dinkins. This isn't not like,
right.
redneck USA or something. This is liberal bastion of so-called liberalness of, whatever. And the other interesting about the mediascape thing is I have my students, we just went over the US war, the US conquering of the Philippines and how brutal that was. And I had them pay attention to the media environment that was against it and those who were for it in the domestic scene. New York Times again pops their head up and says kind thing. Well, we gotta see what's going on in the ground. We don't really know if they're, torturing everybody. So I said to them, look at the media, look at the newspapers that are named, see if they exist. They don't exist anymore. Now see the one that is from the 1898 New York Times, that still exists. Why? Then think about why. So they got them, like, I don't have all the answers, but I think it's part of what your analysis has been, which is there's a lot of funding. There's a lot of like, help along the way. Like, hey, you're doing the right thing. Can we have a meeting with the editorial board? I mean, literally New York Times editorial board, they meet with government officials. They always have these sit downs with them. So why is it the Baltimore so-and-so doesn't exist anymore, even though they were calling out what was going on in the Philippines? But the New York Times, they've gone through it. When you read these things, they went through whitewashing the murder of Filipinos and Cubans to the model minority and to this and this. It's wild how some papers have been in existence for this long. And then you think about what they promote and then okay, that makes somewhat of a sense. Like, this is the game that they're doing, that they're rigging. And I just wanted to say, like, she is really good she makes a big part of her thing about the opinion makers. She talks about it. She says the opinion makers are involved in promoting these things because of their own class and ideological backgrounds.
Well, just as we start to move towards a close here, for today at least, the only other point I want to just come back to is that my note here about Kim's work is whiteness still polices these interactions, forcing a new version of my point about how we're carrying out white politics via blackface. Yeah. Now, I'm basically done, but I want to make sure that if there was, because I think I rushed you past a couple points. If there's something you want to come back
I think we should do another live on the book, The Asian Americans Anti-Black World. I wouldn't mind trying to do that.
Do you want to move that up to be next? Should we just move
if that's fine?
Next? That's fine with me.
It'll force me to read it because I'm doing my dissertation. But I just, for a next discussion, I do want to ask the question though, is like, because in that review article that we read too, it's a collection of folks who are also contending with not missing links, but some aspects of her work. And I kind of hinted at the start of it, where I actually do think though that it may need to be updated slightly sometimes because so formally the leading sub ethnic group of Asians now are Indian Americans and South Asians. So that's one thing to realize about the Asian population haven't changed. But the other thing is, with everything that's going on in terms of just the expansion of ICE through Democratic, Republican admin and everything else, the war on terror, something on my mind, has expanded. That's really what's going on. And the war on terror did, of course, affect Muslims, many of whom are Asian. It's forgotten. And of course, Arabs who are non-Muslim who are just viewed as Arab. But we can talk about this more the next time. But the questioning of like what needs to be updated, because I think some of it is a bit complicated. Like with African Americans, I do think, yes, they are more politically, quote unquote, incorporated than Asians. That's for sure. They're not always questioned about their origins. Because like you said, Tucker Carlson is now using that to his advantage. But there has been instances of African Americans still being asked to produce their documents. So there's a little bit of that happening, I think, in this unknown known era. And then simultaneously, maybe there is a bit of a civic incorporation that's happening for some Asians, because how more civic oriented can you be than be Kash Patel? Like, you're the head of the FBI. So that's something that was like, I'm not blaming Kim because she's amazing. I'm just saying, like, it just shows you how crazy the timeline we're in. Maybe there does need to be, because I think one of the articles that's in that collection mentions class, and also another one mentions the empire. And I think that's sometimes a bit missing, because the empire is another way that adjudicates identity very heavily for Asians too, right? Like how South Asians were seen, Muslims especially, and Sikhs, was because of what was going on over there happening here. And then that, I think, makes it a little bit more interesting about that. And I would argue, just really quickly, I think we're entering a space where we also need to just talk about anti-socialism and anti-communism. I think I saw a comment mentioning
Absolutely.
how South Vietnamese want to be white. That's true. That is 100% true in some aspects. But we also need to be forward with the idea that anti-communism, as Sharice Burden-Stelly says, is the real religion of this country. So there are certain trade-offs you can do as a person of color. The biggest one is hating communism. What that represents can be as big as you need to be in the context of it. That could incorporate being an informant on the FBI for your fellow Muslim brothers and sisters. But I just think that's another element, like the political nature of the society being so fascist. That is something that I don't know. I just have some questions about. And again, it's not a right or wrong. Actually, these are like open-ended to me, but I would love to talk more about that with that book in mind for the next time.
No, we look, not to overfill the plate, but we should read the book and we should read this whole journal because you raise some good points, as does, so for instance, they say here in discussing some of the criticism of Kim's work, and then Kim apparently also contributes to this.
Yeah.
So it's adding to your point about how good she is, that she's willing to engage principled criticism, which is excellent. Jordy Davis argues that racial triangulation's conceptualization of Black Americans as insiders risks creating a false equivalency between Asian Americans and Black Americans that misrepresents the unique and pervasive impact of anti-Blackness. Nadia Kim moves us to look beyond the boundaries of the nation state and examine how the development of the American empire globally is deeply intertwined with the processes of racialization domestically. So yeah, there's a number of really interesting threads from that journal article, lovingly criticizing her work, Kim's work, that we could, I think, would be helpful here as well.
Before I just want to add the Claire Jean Kim, what she adds to the collection is a really good sense of, like, she says, look how quickly both parties were quick to pass anti-Asian hate crime legislation in the same year where they didn't pass things for George Floyd. It goes into the other critique about, well, one is expanding a certain carceral nature of the state that also needs to be part of that critique. But she's great for saying that. I just want to give her props. And I want to raise another writer really quick, Sunaina Mayar. We can talk about her, but she is the one who brought up the idea of flexible citizenship and this idea of the empire also being very, very part of the South Asian Muslim identity. So I just want to give her her props, because she's also around and she's part of I think a boycott movement for academics, I believe. So just wanted to give her a shout out to that.
Hey, if you ever want to reach back out to any of these folks, we can invite them to join us for some of these conversations. I'm serious. I think it'd be kind of cool. But
definitely.
But yeah, you raised a very good point that I did see raised in one of these in that journal article that Kim, I think it was in the journal, one of the articles, Kim points that out, that look at how Asians are seemingly getting some political progress on the anti-Asian hate movement, but it seems to come at the expense of George Floyd's and Black people's struggles getting the same kind of legislation and support as well. So she's so folks, I'll pull this up here if folks want to join us to a certain extent. This is the book we'll be getting to for next time: Asian Americans in an Anti-Black World by Claire Jean Kim, whose work we've been discussing a little bit this morning and afternoon. So if you want to get a copy and join us or read some in advance of when we schedule that discussion, please do. Sudip, this has been great again, man. I appreciate it, and I'm enjoying the direction. And we'll I look forward to getting to this book, which is helpful because we do need to cleanse from the Crazy Rich Asians joint. That joint was.
I actually was glad we watched it, but in the beginning I was like, "Oh, this is going to be a tough ride." But once I saw little clips in here and there of that, I was like, "I'm actually really happy you read this."
You made it. Yeah, you extracted the value for us from it. But if we could make that pun,
Yeah.
that I definitely appreciate it. So folks who have joined us this today, thank you very much. Those who see this later, thank you as well. Please do like, share, subscribe, do all the things. Sudip's work, I think I need to add it again to this one, but to your Substack, I want to make sure people can get to your work in the show description. And yeah, man, thanks again. I'm loving this project. This has been very helpful. And yeah, more to come. So yeah. All right, everybody.
Hey, everyone, thank you so much.
In the spirit of the original Rainbow Coalition, peace, only if you're willing to fight for it, as Fred Hampton used to say. And we'll catch you next time with more. Oh, wait. I want to get this in here again, because this has been a great educational experience for me.
Is Jared in class today? Jared, are you here? Oh, yes, you are.
Now, in the spirit of the original Rainbow Coalition, peace, only if you're willing to fight for it, as Fred Hampton used to say. Thank you again, Sudip, and we'll catch you next time with more.
What did you sacrifice? Calm, kindness, kinship, love. I've given up all chance at inner peace. I made my mind a sunless space. I share my dreams with ghosts. I wake up every day to an equation I wrote 15 years ago for which there's only one conclusion. I'm damned for what I do. My anger, my ego, my unwillingness to yield, my eagerness to fight, have set me on a path from which there's no escape. I yearn to be a savior against injustice without contemplating the cost, and by the time I look down, there's no longer any ground beneath my feet. What is my sacrifice? I'm condemned to use the tools of my enemy to defeat them. I burn my decency for someone else's future. I burn my life to make a sunrise that I know I'll never see. Now, the ego that started this fight will never have a mirror or an audience or the light of gratitude. So what do I sacrifice? Everything.
I mix what I like.